Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Requesting a trade in the NFL is something that happens from time to time when a player gets disgruntled. And sometimes these requests work, and the player is able to force his way out of the city. However, there is a right way to request a trade and a wrong way to request a trade. And then, there's an absolutely stupid way to request a trade. Requesting a trade is one thing, but to request a trade to a specific team, barring some unusual circumstance, good luck with that. And then to not only request a trade to a specific team, but to request a trade to your biggest rival in the same division? Why the heck would you think that would be a good idea? Trades within the division are incredibly rare, especially for talented players. Why would a team want to give up a contributing player to a rival that they have to face twice a year? Yet for whatever reason, in 1987, Los Angeles Raiders wide receiver Dokie Williams absolutely did not get the memo on that, because in 1987, fed up with his situation with the Raiders, he decided to request a trade in just about the stupidest way possible with incredibly predictable results. And this is the story behind that awful trade request. Before I talk about the trade request in question, we need some context to understand just who Dokie Williams is, how well he was playing before the incident, and why he wanted out of Los Angeles in the first place. Our story begins in 1983, when the Los Angeles Raiders drafted the UCLA wide receiver in the 5th round of the NFL draft. For Williams, who was born in California, went to high school in California, and went to college in California, he was going to be going through another stage of his life in California. Initially, taking Williams was purely for depth purposes, but with one starting receiver in Malcolm Barnwell not doing a whole lot up until that point, and with another starting receiver in Cliff Branch well into his 30s and not having much left in the tank on paper, Williams knew that there were going to be opportunities in the near future if he played well. And sure enough, after coming off of the bench over those first 2 seasons, Williams was in the starting lineup by 1985, as he started all 16 games. And in his first full season as the starter, Williams was an incredibly solid player, as he finished the season with 48 receptions for 925 yards and 5 touchdowns. He was fairly consistent, recording multiple catches in all but one game. And even though he cooled down just a bit by the time the season ended, he got off to such a hot start that at one point, through the first 5 games, he was on pace for over 1,300 receiving yards. By the time the season ended, amongst all qualified players, he was 7th in yards per reception, averaging 19.3 yards per catch. And among the top 7, he was the only one to average at least 3 receptions per game, making his production all the more impressive. How would Williams follow that up in 1986? Well, he did it with just as good of a season, if not better. In 15 games, Williams posted 43 receptions for 843 yards and 8 touchdowns, averaging 19.6 yards per catch. His already high yards per catch total? Yeah, he improved on that, and finished 5th in the league in this category, along with finishing inside the top 10 in receiving touchdowns. He had back-to-back games in November against the Cowboys and the Browns with multiple touchdowns. He crossed the 100-yard mark 3 times, and he led the Raiders in touchdowns, playing a critical part in an offense that finished 4th in the league in passing touchdowns. Dokie Williams was a really good receiver for the Raiders, and it seemed like he would be able to continue that high performance in 1987 after some very good seasons beforehand. However, the Raiders had something else in mind. During the 1987 offseason, the Raiders were about to change their receiving unit in a drastic way. It started with the acquisition of Mervin Fernandez. The Raiders drafted Fernandez in the 1983 NFL Draft, and even though Fernandez was playing for the BC Lions in the Canadian Football League and didn't really have any intentions of leaving at the time, the Raiders held his right should he ever decide to jump ship. Eventually, after 5 seasons in Canada where he made it to the All-Star game twice and made a name for himself as one of the greatest receivers in the history of the franchise, he decided that it was time to go to the NFL, since his contract ran out. He was now taking his starting receiver spot. As head coach Tom Flores said, obviously, we didn't sign him to sit around. But the Raiders weren't done just yet, because they were about to get another high-quality receiver who was on the market. James Lofton was only going to be 31 years old by the time the 1987 season started, and yet in his first 9 seasons in Green Bay, he had established himself as one of the greatest receivers in NFL history. He made 7 Pro Bowls and had 530 receptions for over 9,600 yards. Lofton was a fantastic player, and there's a reason he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. However, by 1987, the Packers wanted absolutely nothing to do with him after he faced trial on a second-degree sexual assault charge. The 2 sides mutually agreed to part ways, and Lofton, who was now on the market, was traded to the Raiders for a 3rd-round pick and a conditional pick in 1988. He was going to be taking a starting spot also. Just like that, Dokie Williams was no longer in the starting lineup, as Mervin Fernandez and James Lofton were taking those 2 spots. Alright, maybe Williams would still play a significant role on 3 wide sets. Not quite, as Jesse Hester, the team's first-round pick from the 1985 NFL Draft, overtook Williams on the depth chart at the start of the season, although Williams eventually leapt over him again later on. Obviously, Williams didn't play a whole lot or see a whole lot of the field because of these acquisitions and moves, and he was frustrated about this. After back-to-back seasons where he finished inside the top 10 in the NFL across the major categories, he was no longer good enough to start. With that, Williams requested a trade, and his request was absolutely laughable. Obviously on its own, requesting a trade isn't laughable. Williams felt that he had very legitimate reasons for doing this. He was a talented player who was buried on the depth chart, and he wanted to play. Nothing wrong with that, especially since there were reports that some of his teammates believed that Williams was still the best receiver on the team, and was better than both Lofton and Fernandez in the starting lineup. Considering Williams was basically a special teams player at this point who only had 4 catches through the middle of October, although the strike had a part to play in that, his frustrations seemed justified. However, where Williams went horribly wrong was with how he requested this trade. Because not only did he request a trade, and not only did he request a trade to a specific team, but the team that he requested a trade to was none other than the San Diego Chargers. Yes, the Chargers. As in, arguably the biggest divisional rival that the Raiders had at the time. As in, the team that the Raiders have to face twice a year, and the team that does not have a great group of wide receivers, meaning that Williams would be able to play and start right away and potentially torch the Raiders. Not only did Williams want to be traded, but he wanted the Raiders to willingly trade a guy that nearly went for 1,000 yards in each of the past 2 seasons to their biggest rival. Sending a letter to Al Davis saying Dokie desires to be traded immediately to the San Diego Chargers is a bold strategy. But that's what his agent, Bruce Singman, did. You can imagine that upon seeing this request, Davis was either howling of laughter in his office or was absolutely fuming. Either way, the result was the same. The Raiders held on to him, with an official telling him, "Let's see what happens." And Williams rejoined the Raiders in practice, so he wasn't even holding out to get his way. His strategy just boiled down to asking the Raiders to trade him to their biggest rival, and then if that didn't work, well, it was worth a shot. However, as we would later find out, that 1987 season would eventually turn out to be his last with the Raiders. Dokie Williams rejoined the Raiders after that bizarre saga, with everyone just pretending like nothing ever happened. Williams refused to speak on the situation, and this strange trade request just seemed like water under the bridge. Just to give you an idea of how weird and strange this whole thing was, the news on this trade request was reported on October 23rd. On October 25th, not even 48 hours later, Williams played against the Seattle Seahawks, and even scored a touchdown. Granted, it was a meaningless touchdown, coming in the 4th quarter of a 3-possession game where the Raiders were trailing pretty badly, but still, it's definitely odd that a player who wanted to be traded to a rival wound up producing in a somewhat impactful way less than 2 days later. As for how the rest of the season would play out, Williams would crack his way back into the starting lineup for a few games. And to be fair to Williams, when he was given more of that opportunity, he played at a pretty similar pace over the second half of the season as he did in 1985 and 1986. In a 6-game stretch from the middle of November until the middle of December, Williams had 15 receptions for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns, including a 23-yard dagger against the Buffalo Bills in the 4th quarter to all but put the game out of reach. Over the course of a 16-game season, that stretch would equate to 40 receptions for over 700 yards and 8 touchdowns, which is on par with what he was doing in 1985 and 1986 when he was in the starting lineup full-time. However, after the 1987 season ended, Williams would get his wish to an extent. The bad news, which was kind of obvious, was that he was not traded to the San Diego Chargers. There was no way the Raiders would have ever agreed to such a move, unless the Raiders were getting a Herschel Walker-type deal in return. The good news was that he was traded and would be able to stay in California, when they traded him during the 1988 NFL Draft, along with a few draft picks for a first-round pick. Just like that, the Raiders no longer needed his services, as Williams was going from one part of the state to the other. Williams no longer had to play any games with the Raiders. However, as he would find out, he would no longer play any games in the NFL. To make a long story short, Williams was somewhat shockingly waived by the 49ers at the end of the 1988 preseason. He wasn't practicing a whole lot. He had an arthritic knee condition, and he had arthroscopic surgery on his knee during the offseason. It was a brutal cut for Williams to go through, considering that he was cut on his birthday, and considering that he just bought a house nearby. His agent was shocked by the news, saying that he was devastated, while criticizing the Niners for cutting him while keeping Wes Chandler and John Taylor instead. Yeah, the Niners really made a mistake keeping John Taylor. He definitely didn't do anything for them later in the season that helped the team out. Anyways, Singman was confident that Williams would find himself in a new uniform, but that did not happen, as Williams would never play in the NFL again. He wouldn't join any other professional league. His days of playing, to most people's surprise, were completely done after that 1987 season. Looking back on it, Dokie Williams had a pretty bizarre career. Some Raider fans still remember him pretty fondly, and rightfully so. He was a highly dependable receiver during the mid-80s at a time where the Raiders didn't have too many receiving threats, and definitely surpassed any expectations that any fans had for him as a 5th-round pick, who was probably never supposed to crack the starting lineup in the first place. But the tale of Dokie Williams also offers a critical lesson in how to request a trade. Don't request a trade to your biggest rival. I know it seems obvious, don't do it. If you're a Cowboy and you request a trade to the Eagles, or if you're a Falcon and you request a trade to the Saints, you're just going to look ridiculously stupid, as was the case with Dokie Williams, and you're not going to get what you want. Requesting a trade is already a bit of a dicey situation, because not only are you stating your intention to never play for the organization again, but you are putting your faith in the hands of your general manager and the rest of the GMs around the league. To have one destination in mind, and to have that destination be a rival organization that you will never in a million years get traded to? Good luck with that. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9, and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.